Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the first ever fantasy playoff edition of the Sunday Night Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am your host, Dan Harris, returning from his mini vacation. With me, as always, is Mike Tagliere. You can find us on Twitter at DanHarris80 and at Mike Tagliere NFL. You know, Tags, when the day started, the thing that kept popping into my head was that movie Airplane and how Lloyd Bridges kept saying, ooh, looks like I picked the wrong week to quit drinking or quit smoking or quit taking amphetamines. It's a running gag with them, but whatever. I mean, right off the bat, you had James Devlin, Alfred Blue, Damian Williams, Kenneth Dixon, Brandon Bolden scoring. It was just a nutty day of football, man.
It was really nutty, and I think that everything happens for a reason. I'm one of those guys that in this life that I think that everything just align. The stars align, you know, at certain times. And my son, last night, he had his first episode, my 2-year-old, he had his first episode of throwing up in the middle of the night. And he was up from like 2:30 in the morning until like 5:30. So I was up with him. My wife was up. We were kind of like, you know, a duo taking care of him. And I fell back asleep on the couch with him around 6 o'clock. I woke up at 8 and I was like, oh my God, I was so far behind my process. I didn't have time to play like almost any DFS because Sunday morning is like when I usually put my lineups together before I get into all my writing and my live streams. So I want to thank my son for, you know, first off, he's doing better. But second off, I want to thank him for doing this last night because it kept me away from DFS this week because it was a mess of a week.
Yeah, let's talk to the producers about this, and let's bookmark this episode of the podcast so that when your boy grows up a little bit, he can really look back at this and know that that's why you guys are so close, because it's one random week when the whole fantasy football world went crazy. His throwing up saved you from too much, you know, DFS. That's good. No, I've been there. You know, my kids are a little bit, for the most part, out of that stage. But man, those nights are tough, dude. I feel for you right now. But are you ready? Are you ready to bring your all even now?
Yeah. And I knew that the reason I even went back to sleep at all, because usually I'd just get up, but I knew that the Bears were on the night, and I was going to have some friends over, and we're going to have a good time. So I needed to get a little bit more Z's than I had. And so, yeah, ready to rock, dude, and talk about this oddball slate of games.
Yeah, it was certainly crazy, and certainly after a week off, I'm ready to go. So let's get into it. But before we get started, I do want to remind everyone about our latest giveaway. It's a signed David Johnson Cardinals helmet. This thing is really cool. You can submit an entry just by going to FantasyPros.com/contest, which will tell you exactly what to do to enter. Spoiler alert, you have to leave a review for the podcast on iTunes. Positive or negative, doesn't matter. You can say Mike Tagliere is my hero or Dan Harris is my least favorite human ever. Don't say that, though. My wife reads those and she gets really upset. Just screenshot your review, send it to contest@fantasypros.com. Now, like all our signed giveaways, this one comes from Pristine Auction, which is an awesome site where you can participate in hundreds of auctions per day. Everything on the site is guaranteed authentic from only the most trusted sources. And the best part is because there are so many auctions, legitimately hundreds per day, there are outstanding deals you can find if you just look around. Yesterday, I saw a signed Stephon Diggs Vikings jersey for $79, a signed Joe Montana 49ers jersey for $116, and a Rob Gronkowski signed Patriots football for $122. So go to pristineauction.com now. I guarantee you're going to love it. That's PRISTINE auction.com. And don't forget to tell them that you heard about them from Fantasy Pros so we can keep doing things like the David Johnson helmet giveaway. All right, Tags, we're in playoffs, so rather than our typical biggest takeaway or winners and losers, why don't you give me a few players who you feel like their value changed the most today?
Well, there's a two-part to this thing, and I want to say that Rob Gronkowski lost value as a defender, but he gained value as a tight end. I think watching that game, Rob Gronkowski is back to being Gronk, and he took a lot of big hits, and he lands awkwardly, and it's just so odd to see someone this big move as athletically as he does, but it's so like a clunky movement, and it just looks so awkward all the time. But he's popping up, he looks fine outside of being a defender, so I think you feel more confident with him going into the fantasy playoffs, further into the fantasy playoffs, because you better have started him this week. But the other names, obviously, you know, we're going to talk about Derrick Henry, that there's going to be some confidence with him. I don't think that you should go bananas and think that he's going to be an RB1, but obviously he is going to receive the lion's share of the carries there with Tennessee, just because he's been running better than Deion Lewis, and it's not even close. Spencer Ware, after giving him a lot of crap last week, I think he had a much better game against the Ravens. He did come down weird on like his shoulder, collarbone. I don't know what it was, but he did return to the game, so I have to assume he's going to be okay. And the couple players that moved down the list, I'd say Aaron Jones. He didn't even start the game for the Packers. I know you could look at the final box score and say, Aaron Jones did fine. But it's more about the fact that we still have an incompetent head coach for the Green Bay Packers, and they're going to be playing the Bears next week. That's obviously not a great matchup for Aaron Jones. And then Jalen Samuels, after all of the crap that we heard about Jalen Samuels and how people were going to leave their leagues if their commissioner allowed him to play a tight end. I mean, the games aren't done yet. Actually, as of right now, the Steelers are losing to the Raiders 17-14. Samuels has just over 50 yards. I mean, Stephen Ridley has more fantasy points than he does. So I think I would say that it's fair to say his stock went down. We don't know when James Conner's coming back, but we do know that Jalen Samuels is not the workhorse.
Man, there was so much there to digest, and I was trying to take notes so I could follow up, but I'm probably going to lose it. Let's start with a couple of things. One, if you didn't know what Tags was talking about, in case you happen to miss some of the Dolphins-Patriots game, and in particular the final play, which was a crazy 69-yard touchdown on the last play of the game, where the Dolphins passed it around a little bit, and then Kenyon Drake just kind of broke free, and Rob Gronkowski, who was essentially playing the deep safety on that play, kind of took a misstep and fell down and let Drake score, which led to a Patriots loss. He did look great on offense. I completely agree. I felt like it was the first time I watched him and I said, oh yeah, that's right. That's Gronk. He looked a lot like the old one. So I agree. And, I'm sure if you owned him, you were starting him because, there was no way you could have picked up Travis Kelce or Zach Ertz or even George Kittle or anything like that. And we will talk about his game later when we get there. But yeah, I'm inclined to agree with a lot of what you said. But, because you mentioned Derrick Henry, why don't we just lead right into our game recaps for the Thursday night game? The Titans 30, Jaguars 9. I mean, Henry, I'm sure everyone listening to this knows by now, he ran 238 yards on 17 carries, 4 touchdowns. He narrowly topped his previous season high in rushing yards, which was 58. So, I mean, look, let's talk about it then. You mentioned it correctly. He has been running better than Dion Lewis lately. For a while, Lewis looked like the guy and he was running well. But of late, Henry really has been kind of not, his numbers haven't been amazing, although he has been scoring touchdowns lately. I mean, before this game, he had 5 touchdowns in his previous 6 games. The floor is low, but let me ask you something. I mean, look, they've got the Giants next week, and we know what you can do to them on the ground without Snacks Harrison, and then the Redskins, who basically were just, the whole team just looks like they're done. I mean, where do you think he's going to basically, if you were basically re-ranking right now for the rest of the playoffs, for the rest of 2 weeks, where would you have Henry, roughly?
I would say it's fair, looking at those matchups, I think the Giants, that's a winnable game for them. I mean, the game script should favor them. They're a playoff team. The Giants aren't. I mean, technically, are the Giants even eliminated right now? I don't know if they are or not. I think it would be hilarious if they won out and made the playoffs. But at the same time, it's going to be tough to say that he's anything more than like a high-end RB3 because it's still going to be a timeshare. I'm not expecting him to run, 17 times a game. Coming into this game, he hadn't topped 12 carries since way back in week 3. So while I do have more confidence going forward in the fact that I do think he sees 12 to 15 carries in a game, Dion Lewis is still going to be involved. And Derrick Henry's still not involved in the passing game. So if for whatever reason either of these games do go negatively, he'll be game scripted out of it. So Derrick Henry, I think a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 would where I'd put him for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I was just kind of doing my rankings, rest of season rankings, and he came in at about 24th, which is basically, I think, what you're thinking of, right? I mean, because that's what he is. His floor is pretty low. I mean, you could easily get out of there with 40 yards rushing. He does need the touchdown other than this last game, which was just preposterous. He needs a touchdown to really be something, and he should get the work, and he's been running better, but he's not suddenly, and I feel like, frankly, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not one of those people who is like, well, now I've got to move him up to, RB10 or something based on this one night.
That's the thing, Dan, is that, if Derrick Henry, like all the talk about him, like, oh, I had him on my bench, how many people were really in the playoffs who drafted Derrick Henry?
Yeah. No, I agree. I hope people, and again, I saw, because you see all these people on Twitter and blah, 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 that there was a lot of blowback about it. I mean, give me a break, guys. If you think that this is something that we or anyone should be able to predict, that's just nonsense. These games are going to happen, and they happen, every once in a while, but it's not as if this was something that anybody could have foreseen. And I was at the Jets-Titans game the previous week in person, which is why I wasn't on the podcast, and, he looked fine, but it was certainly a far cry from that. Against a worse defense than the Jaguars. So he's somebody who you can plug in, you can use, but if you left him on your bench this week, please do not feel bad. You did the right thing, and process over results is something that you hear people talk about a lot, and that's kind of what this is. The rest of it, because Henry had such a big game, pretty much everybody else in the Titans offense does very little. Marcus Mariota kind of comes back to earth. Corey Davis, very little. Anything Any other takeaways that you want to have for the Titans side of the ball?
Yeah, Mariota's lucky that Derrick Henry had the game he did, because Mariota looked like the old version, the bad version. He should have had Corey Davis for a touchdown towards the end of the game. It was like, I think it was a fourth down play, if I'm not mistaken, and everybody thought Henry was going to get it to go for the fifth touchdown. Mariota just missed Corey Davis. So, yeah, I mean, nothing much to take there. I just think it's a very inconsistent offense. Corey Davis was always going to have a tough matchup against Jalen Ramsey, so he was in wide receiver like 4 territory for me this week. But on the other side, it was really disappointing for Leonard Fournette. His matchup, it wasn't a great matchup against Tennessee, because they are a team that typically does well against the run. They had been struggling a little bit as of late, but you figured that his volume would carry him through. But the fact that they're down 3 offensive linemen reared its ugly head. Like, he couldn't get anything going, even on the goal line, getting time after time, just getting stuffed. He should be better than he is. I'm at that point with Leonard Fournette where I just feel like he should be better than he is. I do think that he finishes the season strong. He's playing against the Redskins and the Dolphins, 2 teams that have really struggled against the run, especially the Redskins as of late. So I think he'll probably finish the season strong, but hopefully you didn't get knocked out of your playoffs because of his 41-yard performance.
Yeah, no, I was definitely going to focus on him when we got to the Jaguars, which is what it was. 14 carries, 36 yards, just did not look good. Not exactly his fault. He didn't have an offensive line, as sort of you mentioned. But that was the...
Amari Cooper just caught his second touchdown of the game. I'm sorry, guys. We're recording this as the games are going on. Amari Cooper just caught a long touchdown, the second one of the game.
Man, that is good to hear for Amari Cooper, bad to hear for me, since I am going against him in one of my biggest leagues. But we'll get there in a second, but it doesn't matter. So look, that's basically the point I wanted to get from you, and I agree with it. If you own Fournette and you survived in your playoff matchup, you are going to start him next week against the Redskins and then against the Dolphins. He's still a starter, so don't exactly jump ship just yet going forward. Jets 27, Bills 23. Jets doing what they do, which is win meaningless games at the end of season to cost themselves draft picks and ruin my good fortune. LaShawn McCoy does leave early here with an injured hamstring, barely plays. Chris Ivory sees the bulk of the carries, while Isaiah McKenzie does find the end zone. Now, I had a lot of questions about Josh Allen this week and how startable he was. He had back-to-back top 5 finishes. He's again gets it going on the ground like he always does. 9 carries, 101 yards. And a touchdown, but he does struggle through the air. I mean, you're not considering him. I don't know where you were on this. Are you considering him as a streamer, let's say next week at home against the Lions or at the Pats the following week?
Well, what's funny? We had this conversation on the podcast talking about him versus like Lamar Jackson. And I was saying that Lamar Jackson was a streamer. But then we got to Josh Allen. I was like, and it was like, Brandon Marianne Lee was on the podcast, and she started talking about Allen. She's like, well, what's the difference? And I felt like there is a difference, because I don't know if Josh Allen's volume on the ground is guaranteed like Lamar Jackson's is. But at the same time, it was a good argument. Both of them had good matchups against teams that really struggle against the run with Kansas City and the Jets. So it made sense. I struggled to put him any higher than the QB 18 or 17, or I had him right around that range. So I wanted to put him higher, but I just couldn't do it. And I told people on the live stream today, I said that if you start Josh Allen, he's not a bad play, but if you do, just don't watch the game, because it's just going to be ugly. You'll curse, you'll do this. Like, he's terrible when it comes to actually throwing the football, but he's getting it done with his legs. He's extending plays, and he doesn't really have much to throw to. So I don't think we could fully judge him as a quarterback. It's possible that some of us could have been wrong, myself included, on the quarterback that he could potentially become. But I still stand by that. I don't think you can't teach accuracy, and Josh Allen does lack it. So he's going to need to make plays with his legs. So yeah, unfortunately, the game that we play, fantasy football, he's somewhat of a streaming option week over week. Since coming back from his injury, I think he surpassed Michael Vick as the most rushing yards over a 3-game span in NFL history, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that may be correct. His rushing yards have been kind of silly lately, but for me, I don't know, man. I just can't do it.
I'm with you.
I get to that point, and I'm considering it. Like, I have Russell Wilson in a league where I'm in the playoffs, and I think about like, well, it kind of, my projections for them roughly come out to be kind of similar in the game, but I can't do it. I can't risk my fantasy life on Josh Allen with a guy who really just struggles to throw the ball consistently. And again, like you said, he really has nobody to throw the ball to at this point. We were all kind of hoping for a game from Zay Jones here. Gets 9 targets, but just 3 catches for 22 yards. I mean, you can believe in Robert Foster as a thing if you want, but I'm really not willing to trust it. So for me, the remaining schedule, Lions at the Pats, not bad, but for me, I wouldn't really be relying on Josh Allen. On the Jets side of the ball, Sam Darnold returns. He does leave briefly with an injury, but he has adequate game manager numbers. He does throw 170 yards and touchdown to Robbie Anderson. But the big thing here is the running back. Isaiah Crowell was questionable coming in. He hurts his foot. Elijah McGuire finally gets a little work. 17 carries for 60 yards, not that great. He does get a touchdown, 3 catches, 23 yards to the air. Is he someone, assuming that Crowell is out, is he someone that fantasy owners can rely on in their playoffs? The Jets get the Texans and the Packers in their last 2 games.
Yeah, and that's where it's at. I just started looking at the matchups for next week, and I saw they play the Texans, and it's not really a matchup you want to target for a running back. So even if Isaiah Crowell is out, I can't see myself putting Elijah McGuire anywhere higher than maybe the number 28 to 30 running back territory. I don't think he's someone I'm going to aim to play, because the Jets offense, they clearly just don't want a one-back system. Even Trenton Cannon got 5 carries today in a limited role. He got a target in the passing game. I do believe Cannon would walk into the McGuire role, and then McGuire would essentially take over the Crowell role, which, it's going to net probably 12 to 15 touches, but it's not a good matchup against Houston. Houston's been really good. I was looking at that too. There's been 6 of the last 9 opponents they've played have scored, like the team of running backs has scored less than 20 PPR points against them in 6 of those 9 games. Over the last 5 games, their running backs have averaged a combined just 20.6 touches per game. So even if you say Elijah McGuire is going to get the majority of touches and, Cannon's going to be mixed in, you're probably looking at a 13-7 split, and 13 touches against Houston does mean no good. So McGuire is just an emergency start if you need someone in that slot, but nothing more.
Yeah, I completely agree. Unless you are absolutely desperate at running back, this is not a guy that you want to be relying on with your fantasy life on the line at this point in the season. He looked okay today when he got in, but even if they have a full week to kind of game script around him, it's just not going to make enough of a difference. He should get work, but again, Cannon, I believe Cannon scored a touchdown today. He's going to factor in when he does play, and we don't know necessarily that Crowell is out yet next week. But again, to the extent you own McGuire, and I'm sure you weren't starting him today, but going forward, I wouldn't be too excited about it unless you're absolutely desperate. Browns 26, Panthers 20. Kind of a disappointing fantasy game from Baker Mayfield here. He played well, 18 of 22 for 238 yards and a touchdown. But, Nick Chubb and Jarvis Landry get the rushing touchdowns. Now, we know Chubb is a clear every week start. Let's discuss Landry here. In addition to the 51-yard touchdown run, he also caught 3 balls for 57 yards and a touchdown. He's coming off the big game last week where he caught 6 passes for 103 yards. Is he back in the circle of trust at this point?
I don't want to say circle of trust where it's he's a must play every single week. I don't think that's the case, but he never left my top 30 wide receivers. I was never someone who I feel like he's not meant to be a number 1 receiver. I feel like he's a talented wide receiver. He was just being used in a role that he's not suited for. And they're slowly getting back to the role that he should be playing, more of that complementary role, not the focal point of the offense, and using him in different ways, handing him the ball. There's nothing wrong with handing an athlete the ball. And I love that he ended up with 54 yards and a touchdown on the ground just because it's highlighting that. But to know that he's still getting, today was a down week because, there was only 22 pass attempts to go around, but Landry's still getting 6, 7, 8 targets per game. And because of that, he's always been in my high-end wide receiver 3 territory. You understand that his ceiling hasn't been where you want it to be, but at the same time, you can't find those targets much lower than outside the top 36 wide receivers. So especially someone as talented as him. So I don't want to say he's in the circle of trust where it's you have to start him in every single matchup, but most of the time you're probably going to.
Yeah, and with his remaining schedule, you might look at that Broncos matchup and initially be afraid, but remember Chris Harris Jr. is out for the season, and then he gets the Bengals, who you just play everybody against, so it's all good there. So, I do think if you own him, you are going to be starting him for the next 2 weeks. It's still not, again, the run, the huge 51-yard touchdown run is awesome. But again, just 4 targets here was a little disappointing. But as you mentioned, he only threw 22 times. Baker Mayfield did. So it's not something to be overly concerned about. For me, if I own Jarvis Landry, I don't really anywhere somehow. But if I did, I'd feel pretty confident in him going forward. And I think he's pretty much an every week start. Might not be. The production might come in different ways, but it's certainly something that I would feel confident relying on going forward. David Njoku disappoints, against a team that allows the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends. He's, again, we talk about tight end a lot, but, if you're outside the top few, you do your best with what you can do, but you never know what you're really going to get, right?
That was a great way to put it.
Yeah. No, that's basically what it is. It's kind of like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get there once you get past the top 5 or something. On the other side of the ball, look, kudos to you. You talked up Curtis Samuel a lot this week. I listen to your podcast, man. I listen to you and Bobby talk about it. I want some information too. He has a fine game here. 8 targets, 4 catches, 80 yards. Ian Thomas comes up nice in replacement of Greg Olsen. 11 targets, 9 catches, 77 yards. But really, other than Christian McCaffrey, who scores another 2 touchdowns and continues to be a dominant force, it's pretty dreadful game for the Carolina offense all around. Cam was not good. Is anyone other than Christian McCaffrey in the Panthers offense a must-start going forward?
I have DJ Moore somewhat in that territory. He walked away from this game with 8 targets, 5 catches, 67 yards. He had a carry, didn't do anything with it, but he's someone that he could do a lot with the ball in his hands, and I think that says a lot in terms of, like, with Cam Newton. The matchups they have in the remaining schedule are good ones. Like, they're going to be going up against New Orleans and Atlanta, so I don't think Lattimore is going to shadow DJ Moore. I don't think that they're going to give him that treatment, and then Atlanta after that, they really don't have their pass coverage has been a little bit better as of late, but still, it's not matchups that you're terrified of. I'm more scared of Cam Newton turning into, the old Cam Newton, because to start this season, he was completing a lot of passes in terms of, like, he was doing it like at a rate that he had in his entire career. And most people they wanted to tell me, oh, Mike, forget what he's done. He's a new quarterback. People don't just change midway through the career. Cam Newton is he lacks touch on his passes, and that's a problem. And it was a problem today. There were a few times where he probably should have had touchdowns, just couldn't put any touch in the ball. The biggest story for me here is Ian Thomas, though, because even when Greg Olsen went down last week, he walked into a role where he produced well. And then you see him get 11 targets here, 9 catches, 77 yards. And the fact that Devin Funchess, no catches in this game. I'm curious to look at the snap counts once I'm all said and done, because he's kind of like someone that he's going to be on the field probably in red zone packages, but if he's not a full-time player, you're going to see Ian Thomas used in that role that he was kind of doing, that big-bodied tight end. And Ian Thomas is a great athlete. He's an undersized tight end, but it would still make for somewhat of a big receiver. So I think Ian Thomas is someone to put on the streaming radar for sure, especially knowing that those targets are there.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I was pretty surprised by it. I mean, I like Ian Thomas as a player, but I kind of just thought Devin Funchess would slide into, the tight end role, essentially. But he 11 targets you cannot ignore as a tight end. And basically, I will repeat what we just said with David Njoku. Once you are outside the top 5, you're basically grasping at straws in that point. And if you're going to see a guy getting that many targets, then he's certainly someone to put on your radar. I like the 8 targets for DJ Moore, but man. And, frankly, it's almost the exact same thing we say, what we just said with tight ends, which we say with, wide receiver 3-ish players, right? You're going to have games where you just, you don't know. You try to put yourself in the best position, and what comes will come. So he's certainly an intriguing play, but he's not a must play, or far from it, in my opinion. Packers 34, Falcons 20. First game without Mike McCarthy, and things looked, better. I don't know, the same. Aaron Jones does throw 2 touchdown passes, one to Devontae Adams, of course, and Aaron Jones does rush for a touchdown. But any takeaways here? It really just felt like kind of business as usual. You're going to start Aaron Jones, you're going to start Devontae Adams, and maybe Aaron Rodgers in the right matchup, but I'm not really sure if there's anything else to take away here.
Yeah, I don't know if Aaron Jones got in trouble, if he was punished, if that's why he didn't start this game, because he did end up getting 17 carries. It was more than I thought he had. But yeah, Jamal Williams was out there for the first series, and it made kind of no sense. So I don't know if it was a punishment. I'd be curious to hear more about that, because Aaron Jones has clearly outplayed him all season long. It's not even close. So Aaron Jones, I want to hear why Jamal Williams started the game. Hopefully a beat writer asked that question at the press conference after the game, because I don't get to watch that stuff until the day after. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I was wrong. I basically thought that he'd pop back up on the fantasy radar as Aaron Rodgers' number 2 receiver, and it's just not happening. He's lost all trust. He's not seeing targets. Randall Cobb is now seeing targets again. Equanimeous St. Brown is being mixed into the offense. Jimmy Graham is playing through the thumb injury, even though they're about to go into matchups at Chicago and then at New York. So it can all act up, but right now it'd be just kind of like a surprise performance if he did have a game. So it's so odd to say that there's just one Packers wide receiver that I think you can depend on.
Yeah, I don't think it's close. And I stayed with MVS for a while, kind of. I had the same outlook that you did, and I stayed with him for a long time, and it's definitely not happening. I'm not excited. I know Randall Cobb caught a touchdown today, but I'm certainly not going to trust him enough to want to start him or recommend him as a start in fantasy lineups at this point. It's a really just disappointing. Just the Packers offense. And I hoped kind of that without Mike McCarthy, it would just be, okay, Aaron Rodgers, do your thing. I mean, Joe Philbin hasn't, called plays since, the Carter administration, but I thought it would just kind of be Aaron Rodgers, make this happen. And it just kind of looked the same, and it's really not something that I'm excited about. But of course, Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones are the guys you want to go with. On the Falcons, I mean, they fall to 1-5 on the road, but at least they break their 4-game streak of scoring 19 points or fewer with their whopping 20. I don't know what to say about them here. I mean, Matt Ryan does throw for 3 touchdowns. 2 of them go to Julio Jones, who bounces back. But, with Mike Daniels on IR, for the Green Bay defense, the Atlanta running game looked better. Tevin Coleman and Ito Smith, they split carries entirely. Ito Smith 11 for 60. Tevin Coleman 10 for 45. Any takeaways here on the Atlanta side of the ball?
They're not able to sustain drives. That's what it comes down to. And I think it comes down to the lack of running game. Like, you had a couple long runs out of those two. Like, Ito Smith, I think, had close to a 20-yard run. But they just haven't been able to sustain drives, and that's it. Like, Julio Jones does what Julio Jones does. Calvin Ridley disappears at times. Matt Ryan, he's not very mobile, so if they get a pass rush, he's going to take a sack here and there. It's just they're missing by a little bit all the time. And it's just I don't feel like this offense is far off. I feel like Matt Ryan has had a phenomenal year and somewhat underrated just because of the team's lack of success. But at the same time, it's like in games like this, he started out really hot and then finished fine. But again, you can't put garbage time into the conversation. So it's just, I don't know, man. It's really tough to enjoy even watching the Falcons offense right now. They're usually one that I do, and Julio Jones is just a man amongst boys out there. But the lack of run game is the clear thing here. And I think Tevin Coleman's gone after this season. Devonta Freeman, I think we've clearly seen what he means to this offense to help keep their offense on the field, to do some work in the passing game, a lot more than Tevin Coleman and Ito Smith have done. So, yeah, all I can say about the Falcons offense is just like it's hard to put one word to describe them, but they're just missing. They're just not firing on all cylinders right now.
Yeah, they definitely look out of sorts, and they have for a long time. The Falcons, they do take on the Cardinals next week, which is a good matchup for running backs. But with the way they're splitting carries, I'm not really sure you're going to feel comfortable. And especially this was Coleman's best game in a while, and it was 10 for 45. Right? It's just none of these guys really inspire confidence at this point. So yeah, Julio Jones, you start. If you own Ryan, I'm in a league where I own Ryan. I'm probably not going to the waiver wire. I mean, you'd bench him, but for me, it depends on what's out there at this point. I'm generally a guy, and I don't know, it's tough for me because, it depends on where I rank guys, but for the most part, I just have a tough time starting a guy like Josh Allen, like we talked about, even with a bad matchup for Ryan next week. So we'll see, and you and Bobby will talk about that, and we'll check our rankings. But, it's certainly... It's frustrating to watch the Falcons. Chiefs 27, Ravens 24. Lamar Jackson left at the very end of the game in overtime. RG3 replaced him briefly because Joe Flacco, although there were reports that he was on the mend, he was inactive in this game. But let's start there. Let's assume that Lamar Jackson is healthy next week, okay? He certainly had a respectable game. I mean, 13 of 24 isn't great, but that's him. 147 yards and 2 touchdowns, plus 13 carries for 71 yards on the ground. If Flacco is healthy enough to start next week against the Bucs, does he start, and what would that do to the Baltimore offense?
The Ravens coaching staff, I think they're stuck in limbo right now. They're Leonardo DiCaprio in Inception. They're stuck in limbo, and there's no way out. I mean, I think that they were hoping for either a colossal failure from Lamar Jackson or another win, because they have to ride him if they're winning football games, right? And they came very close. They should have won this game. Honestly, if it wasn't for a Patrick Mahomes on I think it was 4th and 9, just throwing a floater out there to Tyreek Hill, who was playing on essentially 1 foot. I don't know what the hell is happening. They had a linebacker covering Tyreek Hill on that play. CJ Mosley was chasing Tyreek Hill on that play. It was a joke. I don't know what they were thinking in that situation, but whatever the case is, Joe Flacco, I've read all the headlines. I know all the news updates in regards to what they're saying about Flacco, and I know exactly what's happening. Like, he is healthy. He is, like, they were taking it slow. They were saying things to basically almost pacify fans, just to like say, well, we're going to take it extra careful with him just to make sure he's healthy. No, you're going to see if Lamar Jackson falters, because if he does, you're going to go back to Flacco. And now they barely lost a game to the Chiefs on the road in Kansas City. So I do think that Lamar Jackson should be under center. And that's me talking. And I'm a guy that typically looks for, I want to see a pocket passer, but Flacco's not good enough. Like, he's not good enough at this point in his career to win football games. And Lamar Jackson at least presents a different type of threat. So I'm going to say that Lamar Jackson should start. And when he does start, you can't start any of his pass catchers. I know John Brown caught a touchdown. I don't care. You don't start them, guys. You just start the running backs. And Kenneth Dixon looked far and away like the best one today.
Yeah, that was the next question. What do you think? Gus Edwards, 16 carries for 67 yards. Kenneth Dixon, 8 carries for 59 yards and a touchdown plus 1 catch for 21 yards. I mean, what are you thinking about this going forward?
I think Dixon's the better running back, that's for sure. I don't know if the Ravens feel that way. It seems like it's just they're nearing that time. They're slowly ramping up Dixon's carries, and it's like we're seeing Gus Edwards come back down to reality, right? Like, the last couple weeks he hasn't looked great. So when you look at the schedule going forward and you're like, okay, versus Tampa Bay, they're going to be able to run the ball. You know what I mean? Like, Nobody puts up points in the Baltimore defense. Like you saw Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs put up 27. That's like the most they're going to allow, right? So they're never going to be completely out of the game. So you're looking at a situation where they're probably going to rack up 25 plus carries here. And against Tampa, I mean, Kenneth Dixon might have like RB3, RB4 viability in a game where he could surpass Gus Edwards because, as we've seen, he's just outproducing him at this point. So Dixon was in my weekend waiver wire stashes because I felt like he was someone that could take this job because Gus Edwards is nothing special and he offers you nothing in the passing game.
Yeah, Dixon definitely looked better today. I'll be interested to see what goes on next week. But, if Dixon's out there and you can just pick up, if you don't have waivers or anything like that and it's just open, you go ahead and pick him up now because he really is somebody who could make a huge difference in these last two games of the season. They're home versus the Bucs and at the Chargers. On the other side of the ball, I mean, look, you gave a movie reference. I'm going to give a movie reference. For the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, honestly, I kept thinking back to that scene from Rocky IV where Rocky first cuts Drago and Duke says, you cut him, you hurt him, you see, he's not a machine. He's a man. I mean, Mahomes has 377 yards and 2 touchdowns, but just not his usual superhuman performance. He will probably bounce back to that next week against the Chargers. But let's talk about the running game here. You mentioned Spencer Ware here as a guy who you were encouraged by, right? I believe he left briefly, as you mentioned, 15 for 75 on the ground, 5 for 54 through the air. So you are not concerned about the fact, A, that Damian Williams got 2 touchdowns and that they signed Charkandrick West.
Well, Charkandrick West knows the offense was signed, and that was a concern. That was a legitimate concern because West has shown the ability to I don't want to say carry a 3-down role, but he has done it in this offense before, and he did it pretty successfully. So I was worried about that, but the fact that he was inactive tells me all I need to know. He's there for emergencies only. He's not the starter. Damian Williams, it was by happenstance that he had those 2 touchdowns. Right place, right time. If it was Spencer Ware, he would have scored in those plays as well. It just so happened that was the time that Damian Williams was in the game. It's not like they're giving him goal line carries time after time and time again, and Spencer Ware is just an in-between the 20s player. He's not. He looked really good today. Like the Spencer Ware that I remembered from 2016 he looked like. So he's definitely on the starting radar, especially in a matchup against Baltimore. I didn't expect much out of him today. So the biggest storyline here for me, though, is Tyreek Hill. I watched this entire game, and Tyreek Hill was hurt multiple times, had to leave with an arm injury, came back. He was limping around with a foot injury. Like, I don't think this kid... I think it was like playing through adrenaline. Like I've done this before. Like, I'm not playing tackle football, but even playing like a flag football thing. And like you feel like you hurt something a little bit, but you kind of play through it because it's freezing out. Your adrenaline's going, whatever. I think that it carried Tyreek Hill through, and they're about to play on Thursday night against the Chargers. And that's not great. I know he tore them up back in week 1, but it's a different team now. That team has changed quite a bit. And on a short week, it's going to be tough for Tyreek Hill. If he did suffer some sort of ankle sprain, I don't know if he's going to be able to play. So he was barely outrunning CJ Mosley, by the way. So I don't know if that's why the Ravens did it, just because they knew how Hill was banged up. But that would influence this game a lot. So I think that's something to watch going into Thursday night.
Yeah, I didn't watch this game too closely. I did see that he left the game and that he kept at least once, if not multiple times, and he was questionable to return. So if that is something that's bothering him, the quick turnarounds are always so tough, especially this time of year. These guys are beat up. To play another game in just a few days is really difficult. So certainly monitor that this week. It's a big game, of course, for both teams. It could essentially decide the AFC West. So we'll have to check in there, but Hill does at least produce for his fantasy owners today, despite the injuries. Dolphins 34, Patriots 33. We did talk about this crazy final play. I really wish Bobby had picked the upset again for his bold prediction. When you guys...
He actually debated it, so we cut it out of the podcast. So it's like editing. So there's editing in the podcast, and Bobby goes to me, because he was thinking about his bold prediction. He was like, should I go the Patriots again? And he's like, no, that'd be too. No, I'm not going to do that. That's not going to happen. And it was so funny because I was having a conversation with my video producer this morning about that. And I was like, and he was talking about basically another game that he wanted to happen. I'm like, why? And he's like, oh, so my team can get home field. I'm like, oh, that's right. You're a Pats fan. So should I say that the Dolphins are going to win this one or what? And he's like, no, we're going to beat them by double digits. It's so weird too, because when you look at the New England side of the ball, Brady had probably his best game of the year, statistic speaking, 358 yards, 3 touchdowns. They just didn't stick to the run as much as I thought they would. Brady throwing the ball, 43 times. They dominated the time of possession in this game. But yeah, Sony Michel, 20 carries, 57 yards. I didn't think he looked bad, but it's just, I don't know what happened. Miami was just, I don't know. I still, thinking back, because this game was like, it was on one of my screens, so I was watching quite a bit of it. But I still walk away thinking, how did Miami win this game again?
Yeah, no, it certainly was. I mean, again, the last play was essentially a fluke. So, they should have lost.
That was nuts.
Of course, it was crazy. If you haven't seen it, please go back and watch it. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I guess they started out running it. I think Michelle got something like 7 carries on the first drive or something like that. But they just could not sustain it, and they were having such success passing the ball. Xavier Howard was out, so I guess they moved it. But yeah, it is not a game that I expected the Dolphins to win. But weird things happen when the Patriots play in Miami, man. It's kind of been the history since Brady's been there. But yeah, no huge takeaways either for me. I mean, everybody in the passing game looked pretty good. We talked about Gronk already. Edelman gets it done. Josh Gordon looks pretty good. So there it was fine. The running game, it's just a weird game. I would expect that, against the Steelers, it's going to be a hard-fought game like it usually is, but I expect the Pats to play well in a bounce-back game there. For the Dolphins, look, Kenyon Drake does get the touchdown on that crazy final play, but, I mean, that was his only reception. He sees just 6 carries to Frank Gore's 12, and Frank Gore admittedly ran very well, but you are not trusting Kenyon Drake going forward, right?
No, I'm not. He's someone that I would definitely avoid moving forward. The matchups they have coming, they're going at Minnesota. That's a brutal matchup for any running back, let alone one that plays for Adam Gase. And then after that, they're against Jacksonville. I know Jacksonville just allowed a ton to Derrick Henry, but before that, I mean, I want to say that there wasn't a running back that had totaled more than like 80-some yards against them. So, it's not a good matchup. Again, Drake is that player you stick into your lineup if you're just looking for an explosion of some sort, like a big play. And that, he delivered that today. And I felt like this was a matchup that he technically could have. I felt like game script should have went his way in that one. But with those 2 matchups left, especially at Minnesota, no, I wouldn't play Kenyon Drake if I could help it.
No, neither would I. It's pretty much you can just pick out a tidbit out of any one of our many podcasts, and you would hear the same thing. We love Kenyon Drake's talent, but he's just not getting the workload. So it's not somebody that we're willing to trust. So if you see the box score and you see the long, I don't how many yards he actually gets credited for, if all of them, but if you see the long touchdown catch, don't get too excited. It was kind of a crazy play.
Yeah, it was like 55 yards. I think he was credited for that one.
Yeah, exactly. So don't get too excited by it because it was a nutty last play. Kenny Stills with the big game, 9 targets, 8 catches, 135 yards, and a touchdown. I assume you're also not trusting him going forward?
He definitely increased his confidence if you were even debating it. But at the same time, yeah, like thinking about those matchups, like when looking at it, Minnesota's not a great one to attack, and Jacksonville, obviously, with Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye, it's not a plus matchup either. So, yeah, probably not.
This is kind of what Stills does every once in a while. He has these big games, and certainly if you were starting him, kudos to you because you.
But he's been better with Tannehill, though.
Yes, that is true. That is true. And I liked him coming into the year, as I said, sort of in the beginning of our podcast, but. At this point, if you're going to rely on him against the Vikings, then, you're a braver man than I am. Saints 28, Bucks 14. This looked a little dicey here for the Saints at halftime, but they come back big in the second half. Let me just briefly talk about Breeze. I do want to ask you, he gets the rushing touchdown and he throws for 1, but only 201 yards. You take away the game against the Bengals, and Breeze has struggled on the road over his last 5 road games. Are you at all, I'm sure I know the answer, but are you at all thinking about even potentially benching him next week on the road against the Panthers?
Against the Panthers, probably not. They're a team that he knows really well, and it's at Carolina, isn't it?
It's in Carolina, yeah. That's why, on the road.
Oh, yeah. It's a divisional game. I'm going to look through that because, like, history in divisional games does matter, especially when you don't have a coaching change and Ron Rivera's defense. I'll be looking at that. But the Panthers' defense has been actually somewhat giving to quarterbacks. I believe they've allowed multiple touchdowns, and like I want to say coming into this week, it was like 9 of their last 10 games, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even not 10 of the last 11. They've allowed multiple touchdown passes, so that's something to look forward to. The Bucs have actually been, I don't want to say better, but they've been slowly limiting, passing games like over the past like month and a half. I think it comes down to their run game. Their run defense has just like disappeared all of a sudden. But this game was just messy. I don't want to take too much, but I didn't like Breeze coming in very much. Breeze had the last 2 trips that he had to Tampa Bay, talking about those divisional games and the coaching. There was no coaching change with Tampa. He had thrown for less than 250 yards in each game. He didn't throw for more than 1 touchdown. So it's now 3 games running where that stat exists. So those things do matter. I was just more disappointed in the run game. I'm guessing it had to do with the field conditions. They had put down new sod in Tampa Bay. They do that every December. So at the beginning of December, they put down new sod. It was pouring leading up to this game. So the field was suboptimal to get footing. So that's obviously not great, but yeah, man, it's hard to see teams getting through their first matchup in the playoffs with if you have Michael Thomas. I mean, in PPR formats, he looks good, But in Drew Brees, his performance, Alvin Kamara's performance, I don't think these guys carried you through to the next round. So hopefully you had some depth that, you made it up somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a little hard. Again, we're in a recap show. We try to basically keep discussion as we can to a minimum. So I was thinking about, boy, do I ask, about Kamara at this point? He has kind of a disappointing game, just 87 total yards, I believe, but you're not benching Alvin Kamara if you own him, obviously. So you're going to keep going with him. Brees is a guy who I do think, frankly, at this point on the road, you can think about it. You can think about it at this point. Again, if I own Brees, I'm not the type of guy who's going to stream somebody over him. Sometimes that bites you in the butt. I told the story about not starting Josh McCown a few years ago when he was with the Bears against Tony Romo and the Cowboys. And it happens sometimes with these streamers, but I'd probably stick with Brees, but you certainly need to lower your expectations. On the other side of the ball, the Bucs, Winston throws 2 touchdowns, both to Cameron Brate, 2 short touchdown passes, which is funny because the Saints are so good against tight ends. Hold him to 36 yards per game, but, he had 12 yards or something like that. The rest of the pass catchers, kind of disappointing. Adam Humphries, just 4 catches, 42 yards. Godwin sees 10 targets with just 1 catch for 13 yards. Any takeaways here on the Bucs side of the ball?
It was just an ugly game. Again, coming into the game, I lowered my expectations for both Winston, Brees, the receivers. Like I took Godwin out of DFS. Like the lineups that I did have already set, I took Godwin out of just because I didn't like that. I thought Adam Humphries would be fine. He didn't even post a solid game. They have some really tough matchups coming up off the Bucs, and I actually think that Jameis Winston, he goes to like borderline streamable. Like I don't even know if I want to stream him if I'm being completely honest about it. And some people might think that's an overreaction, but when they're going at Baltimore and then at Dallas, those are 2 brutal matchups, and especially at Baltimore. I don't think you want to play Jameis Winston next week. So, I mean, when looking at that for the pass catchers like Godwin, Mike Evans, I think Humphries is the most startable maybe next week against Baltimore, but it's not going to be a great game for them. So be prepared. Like if you made it through on whatever performances they gave you, be prepared to be without them next week because I would not play them. But the Cameron Brate thing is frustrating because the process was right, and I told people to bench Cameron Brate this week, and I'm sorry that he scored 2 touchdowns, but that's the part of football we cannot, the Damian Williams touchdowns, the Brandon Bolden touchdowns, the James Devlin touchdowns. If you tell me who I can talk to predict those things, I'll talk to them all day long, and I'm going to pick their brain. But 2 catches for 12 yards, that's what I'm talking about. Like I felt like there was a chance at a touchdown because he is one of the favorites in the red zone. But I felt like, and I think I said on the live stream, I think that 30 yards and a touchdown is his ceiling. So 12 yards and 2 touchdowns, it's kind of one and the same for me.
Yeah, buddy, I hate to break this to you, but I had Brandon Bolden as like my number 26 running back coming into this. I mean, I had it. I had it all nailed,
That's why you're one of the best, man.
That's right, buddy. That's why I'm here. No, look, of course, that's exactly what it is. It's even different than a Derrick Henry where he has a huge game. I mean, Brate did not have he had 2 catches. They just both happen to be short touchdown catches. So this is going to happen. But again, once you're dealing with tight ends outside the top few, it doesn't really matter. You're kind of just grasping at straws. Brate's a guy who, when I own him, I usually just throw him out there and I don't worry about it too much. I was not expecting a good game here. So certainly if you own him, you should be pretty happy with the performance. Giants 40, Redskins 16. Disappointing effort here from the Giants with only the 40 points, but without Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, you got to give him a pass. Look, the big news, if there is Mark Sanchez was benched for Josh Johnson, who plays fairly well in garbage time, throws for a touchdown and runs for another one. Jordan Reed does leave the game early with an injury. Adrian Peterson has a ridiculously terrible game, just 10 for 16. Look, as far as I'm concerned, Tags, we can blow through this one pretty quickly. I'm really not sure there are many takeaways here. Saquon Barkley is awesome. You don't really want to start any Redskins. Tell me whatever you want to take away from this game.
Not much. Saquon Barkley's awesome. Disappointing game for Sterling Shepard, for sure. With Odell Beckham out, thought it would be bigger for him.
He does catch the TD, of course.
But yeah, Adrian Peterson, I mean, do you think he's playable? I don't think I want to start anybody from that roster right now.
No, and don't be fooled, by the way. He's against the Jaguars. Don't have dreams of Derrick Henry in your mind. That's not a good matchup. They're going to have, an extra few days to prepare. Just no more. And he doesn't look good, but it's, again.
Yeah, they're missing both starting guards. They're down to their 4th-string quarterback now because it was announced that Josh Johnson's going to start. That already was announced. So apparently Gruden had seen enough of Mark Sanchez, which, I mean, hey, come on. I think we all knew that. But Jordan Reed, that's I guess news we should deliver. He left this game with an injury. Don't know if he's going to play next week, but even if he does, I am not trusting him.
Yeah, at this point, essentially avoid all Redskins and Giants except for Saquon Barkley and Odell Beckham Jr. when he does play. I think that's good analysis right there. Colts 24, Texans 21. Huge bounce back effort for both Andrew Luck, who throws for 399 yards and 2 touchdowns, and T.Y. Hilton, who is questionable, seriously questionable with the shoulder injury. 9 catches, 199 yards. Eric Ebron scores a touchdown in a good matchup against Houston, who struggles against tight ends. Marlon Mack finds the end zone, but just 33 yards on 14 carries. He's been trending down a bit. What's your big takeaway from the Colts side of the ball?
No, I mean, people are going to be like, wow, they did this against the Texans. I felt like the Texans have a beatable secondary if you can withstand the pass rush, and Andrew Luck has been one of the best protected quarterbacks in football. So I actually liked Luck quite a bit. I had him as a top 5 quarterback this week, so it doesn't surprise me to see them do this. T.Y. Hilton, 9 catches, 199 yards. That's more than I thought. But to know he didn't get a touchdown kind of sucks. But Zach Pascal has clearly passed up Ryan Grant. We even saw Dontrell Inman pass up Ryan Grant. So it's not like you were going to rely on Ryan Grant, but Zach Pascal, I haven't looked at next week's matchup, and I'll do all that in the primer, but he is clearly the number 2 option in this offense right now. Well, behind Hilton and Ebron, but I'm talking about wide receivers.
Right, and you're not starting him unless it's a super deep league, are you?
Well, correct. The thing is, you want to find a matchup where Luck's going to throw the ball 45 times, because if Marlon Mack's going to struggle running the ball, as he has done, they haven't been able to run the ball, so you're starting to see Luck's pass attempts start creeping up. So if you see T.Y. Hilton with like a brutal matchup, and you're like, okay, if Luck's going to throw the ball 45 times, T.Y. Hilton's in a terrible matchup, you do want to look further down the depth chart to say, who's going to get these targets? Who is going to get that yardage? So I always look at that, and that's why I don't want to cross him off just yet, but I do want to say that he is slowly working his way up the depth chart, while Ryan Grant he's just non-existent.
Certainly, that's true. I mean, it would be hard for me to trust them. I mean, against the Cowboys next week, they're probably going to continue to have trouble running the ball. So that is a fair point, but I imagine it'd have to be a relatively deep league. On the other side of the ball, look, the Colts are good against wide receivers. They give up the 3rd fewest yards per game. They don't give up a ton of big plays, and that's basically what happened here. DeAndre Hopkins disappoints. He does get the late touchdown, but just 4 catches for 36 yards. Lamar Miller has an identical rushing line to Marlon Mack, 14 carries for 33 yards. He does find the end zone, but so does Alfred Blue. What do you want to take away here on the Texans side of the ball?
I think this one has more to do with Deshaun Watson. I think he had a bad game. I watched a lot of this game as well, and Watson, he's just holding onto the ball too long, and then it's just like he's escaping pressure, and then he's throwing the ball while someone's grabbing at his foot, or he's throwing it while falling down. He's off target. He doesn't give his wide receivers a chance. Hopkins actually had double coverage on a play, and he beat him on a post route, and he had a couple yard separation, was just overthrown. The ball wasn't even catchable. So I just think it was a bad game on Deshaun Watson's part. The Colts they're fine. They're a good run defense, so I wasn't shocked by Lamar Miller's disappointing performance, but I was unfortunately disappointed by Deshaun Watson. Just a bad game all around for him.
Yeah, I mean, he should be able to bounce back next week against the Jets, which is a pretty soft matchup for every fantasy player. But it was disappointing, especially because he's finally throwing the ball more than he used to. Right, he used to be capped out kind of at 25, maybe 28 pass attempts, and now he's more in the 35, 36 area. So it would have been nice to see a bigger game. But yeah, I agree. How about the running game real quick? Any worries here? Is it just the usual sort just a bad game for Lamar Miller?
Yeah, no, just a bad game. I mean, the thing is, the Colts have not allowed a running back more than 95 yards this season on the ground, so they've been really good. Their young linebacker core, Anthony Walker, Darius Leonard, have been really good up the middle. The safety play has been good with Clayton Geathers getting healthy. It wasn't shocking. I mean, I'm not too worried about it, because Lamar Miller did struggle against Denver. He struggled against the Colts. Those are 2 teams that have been doing well against the run, so I'm not overly concerned about it. No, I mean, they should get back on track next week against the Jets.
Yep, I agree. Going to the later games, Chargers 26, Bengals 21. A surprisingly competitive game here. I did, we were going to record right as this was starting. I did see Austin Eckler look like he got injured on the onside kick.
I think it was a concussion.
Yeah, well, they do have a Thursday night game, so to the extent you've been
he would not play if he suffered a concussion. It's not happening.
That's exactly right. Now Melvin Gordon is rumored to be able to come back against the Chiefs. It's a huge matchup, so fantasy owners need to monitor that. But really, Eckler does kind of, people were excited about Justin Jackson, only 7 carries, 12 yards. He does have 2 catches, but Eckler was far more effective. But not a whole lot going on. Keenan Allen catches another touchdown, continues his second half surge, but anything on the Charger side of the ball?
No, Eckler, I talked about this, and I didn't quite understand. I like Justin Jackson as a player. I didn't understand why people were just saying, like, he's automatically the bell cow. He's walking into the Melvin Gordon role. I didn't get that. Eckler struggled last week, yeah, but I felt like he had the more valuable role, so it doesn't shock me. But if he did suffer concussion, which it did look like he did, like he took a bad hit and he went to the sideline, like it just seemed like that's the case. So if he misses this game, and if Melvin Gordon's out, yes, Justin Jackson is going to be like a must-play RB1 against the Chiefs. The Chiefs have been terrible against the run all season long. They've allowed, it's now 20 running backs to score at least, I think, 12 PPR points against them, if I'm not mistaken, which is just crazy. Like it's by far the most in the league. So definitely pay attention to Eckler and the Melvin Gordon situation, because they may decide, because they walked away with a win against Baltimore, that it was such a big win. You know what? Let's give Melvin Gordon an extra week. We're going to be in the playoffs. We know that. We need to make sure he's healthy. It's an MCL sprain. It's not like you're talking about, like, you know, it's something you have to be careful with. And I think they should have learned their lesson when he was active for that game he got hurt in. So monitor the situation and just know that if Justin Jackson is their top running back, like by default, start him.
Absolutely. I mean, any against the Chiefs, certainly, but any running back on a good offense who's going to get the bulk of the carries has to be considered a starter. But yeah, I mean, hopefully Eckler's okay. Hopefully Gordon comes back. But if not, you know, don't go dropping Justin Jackson just yet. On the other side of the ball, I mean, Joe Mixon, I mean, great game, 26 carries, 111 yards with the score, plus 5 catches for 27 yards. You know, very impressive with Jeff Driscoll at the helm. Anything you want to take away here on the Cincinnati side of the ball?
Yeah, Joe Mixon looked really good running the football today. They involved him a little bit more in the passing game. It's nice because, like, I had written that Giovanni Bernard was all of a sudden getting more and more touches, and I didn't really understand if, like, what the philosophical change was. Like, was Hugh Jackson added to the offense to bring down Joe Mixon's touches? Because this is not what he does. Like, he gives Isaiah Crowell touches. Why is he taking away from Joe Mixon? But it was definitely good to see Mixon get as many carries as he did. He ended up with 31 touches in this game. So he's obviously a must play. The entire passing game is suffering with Jeff Driscoll. It's just, I mean, Andy Dalton wasn't great to begin with, but going to this, it's just, John Ross continues to catch a touchdown like once every 5 targets, but outside of that, yeah, it's crazy, man.
Yeah, Boyd's somebody who you can still, you know, look at in kind of the wide receiver 3 range, but certainly the offense as a whole gets hurt. They are facing the Raiders and the Browns on their last 2 games, so hopefully if you own Mixon and you continue to advance, he can continue to produce for you. 49ers 20, Broncos 14. You know, there's a few things to take away from here, such as George Kittle with 7 catches for 210 yards and a touchdown. But Jeff Wilson, frankly, this was sort of his break here with Breida finally succumbing to the ankle injury. 23 carries, 90 yards. And he adds in a catch for 6 yards. Takeaways here on the 49ers side.
It's crazy. I didn't think Jeff Wilson was going to get more than like 50 yards on the ground. I envisioned him getting in some yardage through the passing game, but it's kind of the flip-flop here where nothing happened in the passing game. He gets 90 yards. He doesn't score, though, and that's a problem because obviously it hurts you in standard leagues if a running back doesn't score. And in PPR leagues, it didn't help you because he has 1 catch. So it's kind of like that middling performance that I think a lot of people expected. It went differently than I think we all expected. But yeah, the George Kittle, I know at one point he needed 5 yards to break the all-time tight end record. I don't think he got it, though.
Look, buddy, I cannot keep track of those stats while we're going to record at this point. You know, I'd love to be able to have things at my fingertips, but I am just trying to make sure that we finish on time. All right, man? But I like it. But if we do, you credit Tags with that, okay? Because he's doing that off the top of his head, so I really like it.
Dude, I'm doing all this at once, I promise you. But Amari Cooper just scored his 3rd touchdown of the game to win the game for the Cowboys. So Amari Cooper, yeah, still very good at football.
Man, I mean,
he scores twice while we're recording. I mean, how could I not bring that up?
I know it's fair. Honestly, I'm trying not to let my own personal views on the situation get in my way because it's going to kick me out of the playoffs in a matchup that I was definitely expecting to win. But anyway, let's go to the Denver side of the ball. You know, in the receiving, you know, Emmanuel Sanders out for the season. Tim Patrick sees 9 targets, as does Deshaun Hamilton. Deshaun Hamilton gets in the end zone. Patrick gets 85 yards, 7 reception, and Cortland Sutton kind of quiet, 2 catches for 14 yards. And in the running side, I mean, Phillip Lindsay has the rare struggling performance here. He does find the end zone, but 14 carries for 30 yards. He makes up for it a little bit through the air with 4 catches for 21 yards. What do you want to take away here from the Denver side of the ball?
Yeah, it was a tougher matchup than most people thought. San Francisco has been really good against the run this year. Even without Reuben Foster, they've been solid. And that, like, so Lindsay was playing too well to even consider benching or anything like that. So I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that it was a tougher matchup than people thought. And that's why Lindsay wasn't like a big DFS guy this week. Some people asked why we didn't mention him on the DFS show, just because it just didn't make sense this week. But yeah, you definitely don't want to see like someone come off the hot streak when you're in the middle of the fantasy playoffs. But fortunately, he finds the end zone to salvage his performance. He has a few receptions. receptions. So I don't think he killed anybody's fantasy team, especially when you got him off of waivers at some point this season. But yeah, it was a little disappointing for the offense overall, especially I think Cortland Sutton is the bigger disappointment here. He was going to be matching up with Ahkello Witherspoon for the majority of the game, and Witherspoon's been terrible. Like the 49ers benched him at one point, but now they can't bench him just because they don't have, first off, they don't have the depth. They've had injuries in the secondary. They were missing Jaquiski Tart for this game. So there were so many things wrong. And someone asked about Case Keenum. I think Bobby asked me, is Case Keenum a solid streamer? And I said, no, you can't, because, you look at last week's matchup against the Bengals and he didn't succeed in that matchup. So it's like, do you really expect much out of him? So yeah, this team is, outside of Philip Lindsay, unfortunately, I don't think there's anybody you can say is a must start every single week.
No, I definitely agree with that. I was really hoping to see something more from Sutton here, at least in terms of the targets, but it just wasn't happening. So I agree. It's Lindsay and everybody else you can kind of, if you're in a very deep league, you can kind of think of. But other than Lindsay, I agree. It's not a team that you need to be focusing on. Look, you heard live play-by-play, courtesy of Mike Tagliere over here with the Cowboys 29, Eagles 23. Amari Cooper ends the day and my fantasy season with 10 receptions, 217 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I can't imagine how happy you are as the president of the Amari Cooper fan club, as you have been for years. Ezekiel Elliott with another monstrous game. Also, the 13 targets and 12 receptions for 79 yards for Ezekiel Elliott to add on to his already stellar rushing totals is pretty impressive. Look, is there anything you want to take away here other than Amari Cooper is awesome as is Ezekiel Elliott, or what?
Amari Cooper, the god.
Is your son named Amari Cooper Tagliere?
I probably should have. I should have went for that. My wife, I don't know if you heard that podcast, but my wife turned down me naming my son Julio. I wanted to.
Yeah,
I could, and so I probably should have went with Amari next, and maybe that would have been closer. I doubt it. But no, Amari Cooper, man, it's just I'm so happy to see him succeed. This has nothing to do with the fantasy success, because I know a lot of people that had him earlier in the year were really disappointed, and he hadn't lived up to that whatever 3rd, 4th round pick that you spent on him. But I'm just, like I said, I'm happy for the player Amari Cooper, because and now going into next year, I think people can properly evaluate how to feel about him as a player, because he's playing for a competent quarterback. Despite everybody saying that Dak Prescott sucks and this and that, I always felt like he was a competent NFL quarterback. I cannot say the same about Derek Carr. I just feel like Carr is a very inconsistent quarterback that you never know what you're going to get, and has nothing to do with Cooper.
Yeah, and honestly, it's completely changed the Cowboys offense. And they're fun. It's fun to watch, frankly. At this point, it really is great to watch. Now,
Zeke loves it too.
Yeah, Zeke loves it, absolutely. They do go up against the Colts next week. We talked about them, that they are relatively good at holding wide receivers in check, but you are certainly not benching Amari Cooper at this point. On the Eagles side of the ball, Corey Clement injures his knee, but he wasn't really factoring in anyway. Josh Adams, kind of a disappointing effort, but everyone pretty much expected that at this point against the Cowboys. And Alshon Jeffrey catches a touchdown, as does Dallas Goedert and Darren Sproles. Anything on the Eagles side?
Not really, that you can't trust Josh Adams in every matchup like some people started to think you could. And I think we knew that all along. There was just too much of a sample size with Doug Peterson to think otherwise. So if Corey Clement's going to be out, I think Darren Sproles becomes a viable PPR option. If you're desperate, the flex spot or like an RB3 or something like that, I do think that he's going to chip into this offense more than people think. I haven't looked at their schedule, but Alshon Jeffrey pops back up on the fantasy radar at the worst time.
Yeah, sorry, just to be clear, the Eagles are at the Rams and home against the Texans.
Oh, at the Rams, that's for sure. And then home against actually both those games, it's going to be tough for them to run the ball, or they're going to be involved in a shootout against the Rams, I would assume. Yeah, so I think Sproles, he is someone that I would contemplate picking up off the waiver wire. We'll talk about that on the show on Monday. Alshon Jeffrey has been terrible for the last 6 weeks. So to see him pop up back on the fantasy radar against Dallas, a team that has been, honestly, they've been fantastic. I think they've allowed, coming into this game, they had allowed, I think, 5 or 6 top 30 wide receivers all year long. So it's good to see him get back, on the stat sheet, ahead of Golden Tate and all that. Unfortunately, the Eagles didn't come away with a win, and I think that their season is almost gotten away from them here. So it might be a little bit too late, but Alshon Jeffrey, definitely a positive step for him.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with all of that. Raiders 24, Steelers 21. This was going on. Ben left this game for a while with a rib injury. He did come back late in the game and threw a touchdown pass. Look, we talked about Samuels. He did not do much more than what you said sort of at the outset. So I'm not really sure what you want to take away here other than the Steelers' season continues to slip away from them.
They're playing the Patriots at home next week. But the thing is the Ravens obviously lost, so that's big as well. So yeah, that game next week is going to mean a lot to both teams. And Big Ben at home, that game's not on prime time. How did that game not get flexed into prime time? That's my question.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not in charge of that, but I have very limited responsibilities when it comes to...
Get on the horn.
I'm working on it, but frankly, it's a little, above my pay grade at this point. But yeah, no, that's the game. We love to see it. It was a great game last year, kind of single-handedly led to the change in the catch rule. So it should be another big one. And to be clear, I assume the Steelers are still going to make the playoffs. I just mean that they have been slipping away and really not playing well. And but at home against...
And Josh Dobbs is terrible.
Yes. He is not somebody who you would want to rely on if Ben was forced to miss this game, which he should not be since he came back in. How about on the other side of the ball, the Raiders? Doug Martin does find the end zone, but only 32 yards. On 16 carries. Derrick Cook with a big game. Anything here on the Raiders side?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to trust passing options for Derek Carr. And, again, here it comes again. It's 322 and 2 touchdowns. The guy is Jekyll and Hyde. There's matchups where it looks like he should dominate on paper, and then he shows up and he throws for 150 yards and no touchdowns. That happened against the 49ers. And then he walks into a game with the Steelers, who have been relatively good against quarterbacks, over the second half of the season. Actually, after week 5, I think, they had been really good. One of the better defenses in the league. So to see him throw for 322 and 2, it's surprising for sure. But when you really think about it, it's not that surprising just because it's Derek Carr and it is what he is. I just think that the only one that I want to confidently play in this offense is Jared Cook, because we talk about tight ends and how basically after the top couple guys, it's just really hit or miss. And at least we know Jared Cook's going to see targets just because the lack of wide receiver talent on the team. So Jared Cook is someone I'd feel confident playing in each of the last 2 weeks, no matter the matchup.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's really the only guy I'm kind of looking at. I mean, you can start Martin if you're in an absolute pinch, just because he does seem to find a way to produce, and they do play the Bengals next week, so that is certainly a soft match.
Hey, but seriously, the Raiders won this week, the 49ers won this week, who else won that was considered out of it? Detroit won this week. Are people trying not to get the number 1 draft pick? What's happening? The Giants won?
The Jets
won?
Don't forget, buddy. Come on.
That's what I'm saying. What the hell is happening in today's NFL? What is happening?
Look, to quote my main man, the guy who I used to love to listen to, you play to win the game. I don't know, man. You cannot, teams don't really tank. When you get on the field that day, you want to play your best, and this happens sometimes. And as a Jets fan, it happens all the time because they manage to lose their draft position quite frequently towards the end of the year. But yeah, it was again, we've talked about it, crazy day in football. Let's finish it up strong with a really, really exciting and crazy game. The Lions 17 and the Cardinals 3. There is less fantasy action to talk about here. At all. I mean, LeGarrette Blount was kind of maybe, the matchup's so good. 12 carries for 33 yards and lost the fumble. Zach Zenner instead steps in, 12 carries for 54 yards and touchdown. And, look, we were worried about Kenny Golladay with Patrick Peterson, but oh my goodness, two catches for 5 yards. I mean, what do you want to take away from the Lions side?
Seriously, I have not trusted LeGarrette Blount all season long, and then this week I tell people he's a high-end RB3. This is a game Detroit should be in a position to win. They did. He should get, I thought he'd get at least 15 carries. He did not. But Zach Zenner outproduced him, man. Had I known that Zach Zenner would have the opportunity to even get the carries that Blount did, I would say, yeah, Zach Zenner might be the better play because he's probably the better running back at this point in their career. Oh, my God. I hate. Don't ever ask me a LeGarrette Blount question again. Hopefully I never have to deal with it.
All right, everybody, let's get on that, okay? No more LeGarrette Blount questions for Mike Tagliere. Yeah, look, this is, I agree. It's, I mean, I don't know. I owned Blount in a couple of spots. Mostly I tried to block him from the Kerryon Johnson owner who I was going against. But, man, it would have been better for me to just let him go and let him start. I didn't start him anywhere because I just couldn't. Again, this is sort of my fantasy philosophy. I don't carry it with me. I don't necessarily advocate it, to our listeners and stuff like that. But for the most part, I just can never bring myself to do it. I can't bring myself to be like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna roll with LeGarrette Blount and put my fantasy life on the line. Although I'm sure we had him ranked roughly in the same spot. So don't do it. I don't know if Kerryon Johnson is coming back at all this season. My guess is probably not. But either way, never rely on LeGarrette Blount at all ever going forward. And at the Bills and the Vikings wouldn't be great matchups anyway. On the other side of the ball, the Cardinals, they just do nothing at all. Do you want to talk about anything with the Cardinals? Because they're gross.
I'm going to be completely honest. I haven't watched any of this game yet. Now, it is my job to go back and watch all these games on NFL Game Pass, and I do. I didn't watch any of this game because I didn't want to. It was going to be a terrible game, and looking at the box score, it's not one I'm going to look forward to watching. Like, Trent Sherfield ends up with 7 targets, leads them with 5 catches and 77 yards. I mean, oh man, this is
Look, see, guys, when you think that Mike Tagliere has the best job in the world, just know that he has to, basically, for his job, go back and closely watch the Lions versus the Cardinals game. I mean, it's not all peaches and cream over here, okay? The man really puts in, the dirty work, all right?
I look forward to going back to watch David Johnson catch 8 balls for 12 yards. Totally look forward to that.
Yeah. And that is going to be terrible. I feel for you, but I'm going to be doing the same thing so we can cry about it together. So it'll be awesome. All right, buddy, this was a great return. I'm so glad that I was able to come back, and that even though you and Michael Moore knocked it out of the park last week, that they let me come back and still host the show. And that is it. Before we go, I do want to remind everyone about the David Johnson signed helmet giveaway. Just go to FantasyPros.com/contest. And again, that is brought to you by the sponsor of today's show, Pristine Auction. Remember, they have a ton of amazing items up for auction every single day. Just go to pristineauction.com. That's PRISTINE, auction.com. On behalf of everyone here at Fantasy Pros, thank you for listening. Enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.